Eastern Promises is a film that kind of came out of nowhere. I was a big fan of A History of Violence, which is the film that David Cronenberg directed with Viggo Mortensen starring, before Eastern Promises. And Eastern Promises came out fairly soon after A History of Violence, and it kind of just came out of left field. I didn't even know they were working together again. But this film appeared, and I bought it straight away as soon as I heard about it, because I loved A History of Violence so much. Now, this one basically follows Naomi Watts, who's a midwife. A girl dies in childbirth, so Naomi Watts takes the child and wants to track down its relatives, and it ends up leading her to kind of an Eastern European crime family, and she encounters the mysterious driver called Nikolai, played by Viggo Mortensen, and she becomes entangled in this family's kind of personal business and the crimes that they commit happen around her, and she just becomes engulfed in that life almost. Now, what I have to say about this film is I really enjoyed it, but I do not think it's as good as A History of Violence, and I think you can compare the two because David Cronenberg's career now, A History of Violence and Eastern Promises, are very different from his earlier career. Now, I love David Cronenberg, I love The Fly, things like that, his body shock horror films that he did back in the 80s and 90s, I absolutely love, but this is a very different stage of his career, the more kind of restrained, thought-provoking thrillers that he's been doing. And this film starts with a young girl having a miscarriage in a chemist, and also a man having his throat slashed in a barber shop in quick succession. Now, I was watching this film and both those events happen, and I was thinking, yeah, this is pretty much David Cronenberg saying all bets are off. This is going to be unlike anything you've seen. I'm not pulling any punches, and I really appreciate the film for that, and it's consistent throughout, that attitude. They don't pull any punches. This is a horrendously violent, depraved film at times, but they have a story to tell, and the violence has a purpose, unlike a lot of films in this genre where they're violent just so that you'll have something to talk about in the pub afterwards. This film feels like the violence really contributes to the story and the characters and shows you just how ruthless these people are. And I really do appreciate that aspect of the film. What I think is the standout element of the film is that the performances across the board are brilliant. And I think the standouts have to be the leads, basically Viggo Mortensen and Naomi Watts, and also Vincent Cassel, who plays the son of the crime kingpin. 3 great performances, and really do make the film feel better than it should, because at times it runs the risk of feeling almost like a direct-to-DVD, London gangster film that seemed to come out every other month, but it really manages to transcend its genre thanks to David Cronenberg's very brutal and yet restrained direction, but the performances above anything else really do help pull the film up in terms of quality. The standout moment for the film for me is a fight scene that takes place when Viggo Mortensen's character Nikolai is attacked in a steam room, and he has to basically fight his way out while completely naked. And this may sound like, oh, it's just one of those scenes that people talk about just because he's naked, but it's well done, because when he's not wearing any clothes and he is completely stark naked, and they do show everything, when he's in this situation, you can't hide. You can't pull punches in terms of violence because he's not wearing any clothes, so it's harder to hide the fact that it's make-believe and the fight isn't actually taking place. So when you're watching the film and he's getting beaten up, it looks like he's actually getting beaten up. It looks like the other characters are making contact with him, and I have to say it's one of the better fight scenes I've seen in kind of recent memory, because you don't have the comfort of clothes, of dark clothing in which to hide the punches, so to speak. It's all kind of laid out, bare for the viewer, and it really makes it all the more kind of gruesome and brutal, that fight scene, and that's the scene that you'll leave the film thinking about because it's really well done. But to be honest, the actual film suffers in that it's not as memorable as A History of Violence. Now, A History of Violence is a film that I really, really like, as I said earlier, and I think about quite often, and I watch quite often because it's short and it's really enjoyable. This film, however, it doesn't stay with you the same way that History of Violence does. That one scene, the fight scene with Viggo Mortensen in the nude, is probably the only scene that you'll take away with you from the film, and the rest you'll probably forget until you pop it in a few months down the line and you think, oh yeah, I remember this, it's really good, but it doesn't stay with you the same way as the other film does, and for that reason I prefer A History of Violence. Having said all that, I do really enjoy Eastern Promises. I think it is a fantastic film. In terms of David Cronenberg's career, I really enjoy what he's doing at the moment, these kind of low-key, lo-fi thrillers. They're consistently brilliant so far, and I would thoroughly recommend to any fans of David Cronenberg, his early work, the body horror, who want to see him do something a bit different, check out this film. Or for anybody who enjoyed A History of Violence, check out this film as well, because it reunites him with Viggo Mortensen, the leading man from that picture. And while it's not as good as A History of Violence, it is a good gangster film, and it tries to do something original in that it is relentlessly violent, but in a way that serves the story, which you don't see very often in this genre, as I mentioned earlier. But I do really enjoy this film, and I thoroughly recommend it. It's not perfect, you know, it does have its flaws, but then again, which film doesn't? So Eastern Promises comes recommended.